Good morning from Alaska. How are we doing today? You know, last week I was all excited. I was going to release an interview with someone I thought was going to be a worthwhile interviewee. And if you've gone through my past interviews, my deep dive interviews that are listed in the playlist, you can see that I've actually interviewed some very interesting people who have some very interesting ideas about the world and how the world is going. But anyway, last Monday, and you're hearing a little bit about what I'm dealing with, which is this bug. And it hit me, not last weekend, but the weekend before, basically the weekend before I was supposed to do this interview. And based on how the initial investigatory interview went, where I basically talked to the person for the first time and see how well they do, and a banter back and forth, it didn't go well. And I thought, well, shoot. I mean, I got an accusation that I was like talking too much. And I'm like, well, that's interesting because I was asking questions, and every time I asked a question about something that this person should have known, the person didn't know, and I got the nod to like, well, can you fill me in on this? And so I would fill the person in on this. And then it kept on going on where I'm thinking, dang, why am I constantly filling in this person on something that they should know? And after we realized this was not going to work, and I was also at a point that, like, God, all I want to do is just lay on the couch and crap out, pass out, and sleep for the day, which I ended up doing for 2 or 3 days. Because this stuff is it's a bugger. Comes in, wipes you out. I mean, it wipes you out. You got a bunch of duties and chores you got to get done. You want to go get to them. You're excited about doing them. I'm working on my new book, my new memoir about Central America. Getting the outline ready for the book that's following after that, what it was like to come back from the war and my healing process of how I dealt with combat-related PTS efficiently, to the point that I ended up getting hired as a rehab counselor with a specificity in helping clients deal with post-traumatic stress at Friendship House Association of American Indians in San Francisco under the Native American Health Center. This was back in 93, 94, about a couple years after, excuse me, I got back from Alaska the first time. So for a quick history brief, 5 years in Central America. You read about my experiences in prison in Vietnam when I was 18 back in 83, 84. That was the big famous story that everybody got. Heavy coverage, etc., internationally. Yeah, we'll talk about that, about fame and various kinds of fame. And how I came back from that. So that's what Red Road Home is about. But anyway, so I'm crapping out. And I'm thinking, I said, what happened here? I've never had that type of experience, and the language barrier was not an issue. I was raised overseas. I was raised in Southeast Asia. I've dealt with Europeans since I was a little kid, from all parts of Europe. So that's not the issue. So what's the issue? And then the issue finally hits me, and I said, wow. And I just started going back through prior episodes of this person's YouTube channel. And then I realized what this person's doing has no in-depth understanding of the topics that this person's talking about. If you think about it, it's actually a great, with the idea of our society that has been so trained to not go deep into topics. Because if you go into topics deeply, you might think critically. You might think deeper about ideas. You might question things. And if you start questioning things, that is going to be a problem for the powers that be. So this person's whole program is based on jumping from headline to headline to headline. That's when it hit me. This person is just calling out headlines and asking what you think about these headlines. That's the whole program. I'm going, whoa, that's fucking wild. That's wild. I mean, this person doesn't have hundreds of thousands. We'll talk about the ones that have over 200,000-300,000. Yeah, we're going to be talking about those gurus. But let's start off with a low rent guru. So these are the things that I caution people. And that's the reason I'm titling part of this, Choose Your Gurus Wisely. I have not always chosen my gurus wisely. I have followed people trying to learn from them and realize that either they flat out don't understand the subject of which they are trying to be a leader or a teacher or a sharer of knowledge, or they are just so dastardly that they're trying to come off as knowing about subjects in order to get financial gain out of it, in order to bring you in. For those of you who maybe entered a cult or a teaching program, even like a martial arts program. And the true test of a martial arts program is if you get into a street fight and you walk away. That should be something for you to think about. As someone who knows how to fight and realizes that those who know how to fight, as compared to those who try to play the super ninja, those who know how to fight are not loyal to a specific, style, as we used to say. That you pick out, and this is actually one of the best things that I learned when I was working with the SEALs, and this is the SEALs before jiu-jitsu, because all this Brazilian jiu-jitsu, I find that very interesting because, there's so much stuff in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Well, there's a lot of stuff in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but there's also other stuff that's very effective. And if you have that run into Brazilian jiu-jitsu, the practicer of the, BJJ? That's the way they like to call it, the BJJ, are not able to react to it. These are from teachings like Kuksulwan or Chang Chuan from, what was the one that Bruce Lee, and Jeet Kune Do. Jeet Kune Do came across this process of the idea that you pick from various styles to make a new style incorporated specifically for fighting. Hwarang Do. That's actually the reason I went to Korea. I got so deep into the culture because one of the martial arts that I was broached with was Hwarang Do. Hwa is Korean for flower, and Rang is prince. So this is related to the ancient flower princes who were attributed with having defended Korea against all the invaders thousands of years ago, over thousands. And Do is way. That's why like Taekwondo, that's a style or a way of doing a fighting style, right? So what I'm finding is that there are people, and now this is where I'm going to be talking about stuff, where I will be calling names. I don't have to call this other person's name. If you know, you probably know. I mean, it doesn't really matter. He's got his, gig going on. That's fantastic. And on one level, if you're willing to look past the freaking headline and go deep into the topic, that's great. Because you need to look deeper than the headline. That's what's happening in our society right now. We don't go deeper. You cannot think critically and clearly if you don't get all the points, all the items of an event or an idea or or a movement or an attack. We were prevented for how many years to not even be able to talk about things that now I can say the word COVID. I can say the word vaccine. And YouTube won't pull it down, I don't think. We'll find out. There's some things we can't talk about, which is PDFs. You know what that code word's for, right? If you've been reading the Epstein files, as I've been reading the Epstein files, and have to go and freaking brush my mind out with soap because it's so freaking disgusting, and trying to understand their code words for things because they are talking on a platform that they know is not secure. And so they're using these code words talking about cannibalism, adrenochrome, basically vampirism. I mean, real vampires. There are vampires. And we thought this was just fake stuff. But they're real vampires. And they're evil. And it must be this kick that they've got, because it's the idea that they can go do something that the common man, the common person will not do. And we don't do it for a reason. And we found research over the years that proves that we shouldn't be doing stuff like that. Like, you shouldn't be eating the brain. You shouldn't be eating human beings, but you especially should not be eating the brains, because there's an actual disease that you will get. And that we learned this because of Polynesians who were eating their ancestors to take the strength and knowledge from their ancestors to have it continue to go down through the line. But then they had these people who were getting in their 50s and 60s, and they were having these mental issues. And then I found out, it's like, wow, this is because of eating the brains of their ancestors. But it's the idea that power elites, part of their power is the idea of breaking taboo. So that's interesting. Because when the subjects take their power as we take our power, then we break taboos too, which is thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not do a lot of things that when you get into war, and especially civil war, and especially the type of civil war that I see, if the Civil War goes. Because so much has happened in our society that they've dumbed us down and they've emasculated us. And they've done it through various programs. How many people know that, not suffrage, suffragism goes back hundreds of years, right? I agree with suffragism. I believe that women should not be treated as slaves. But in a family unit, I do believe when it comes down to battle, the man is at the head and the woman is assisting and aiding, just like everybody in the family. All the men are the ones who are going to go off to die. Or if you're in a bad situation, it's a home team game and you're just trying to defend your house. But there has to be one leader. You can't have debate in battle. That's the reason there's a hierarchy in the military. And that's in the military. And warriors. That's why there's a chieftain. That's why in tribes there's a chieftain. And we have hierarchies for a reason. And then those hierarchies dissolve when you don't have that. That's something that was recognized in this country. Why we're not supposed to have a standing military. But when we have a military that has to be called up from the ranks because everybody's armed, everybody knows how to shoot, which is what we used to know how to do in this country up until they started disarming us and moving us into cities and then saying, well, you don't have to do that because we have law enforcement here. And that's actually only happened in the last 50 years. Up until then, cops were looked at as guys who did paperwork. The ones who actually did the arresting, the stopping, is the first responder. And who's the first responder? It's the person in the neighborhood, your neighbors. Your neighbors and you were the ones who stopped these people. And if the other stuff starts happening again, which this is what you're going to find. Same stuff. That's why San Francisco was called the Barbary Coast. It's called the Barbary Coast because of vigilantism. That's when they started stringing you up. They didn't wait for the constable to show up or have time with the judge. They basically said, oh, we caught this pedophile right here. And they just yanked that guy up in the air. And that was it. You're going to see that happen as society is breaking down and people are constantly more and more losing trust and confidence in the programs that were created in order to defend and protect the citizen. That's all government's supposed to do. Okay? And part of that devolution is our leadership is not turning out to be the leadership that we thought it was. Why is that? They got voted in, right? Well, partly because who gets picked? And they get picked. And that's going to be the hardest people when people finally realize that the election, there's an old saying, Mark Twain came up with it. And that is, if the election was so, if elections were so effective, they would never let us do them. Meaning the elites, right? And we'll go into Mark Twain. Because people talk about the Bohemian Club. Do you know who was one of the founding fathers of the Bohemian Club? It's Mark Twain. So these people, they give us hints. There's a belief and understanding with these power elites that they can do anything they want to us as long as they warn us. Because if you're warned and you allow something to happen, according to the belief system of these evil elites, that means you're culpable. That means you are actually amenable to what they are doing. If you grab pitchforks and sickles and you go and chase these people down like the peasants used to do, then that says, oh, well, maybe they aren't amenable and culpable to what we're trying to do to them. As I remind my lawyer friends, you may write your laws, but what really enforces your laws is the idea of the word. In a good society, it is, but when the society is falling, it's the guns that enforce the law. And that's the reason that the United States has a constitution, that we have a Second Amendment. So for all these idiots who keep on talking about we need to disarm, like that scumbag Democratic Party leader, what's her name? Evil, hag, reddish curly hair, you know who I'm talking about. She was saying that the reason that all the issues we're having in Mexico this week, is because we haven't disarmed enough Americans. This is how insane these people are. Why? Because we're smuggling in weapons to the cartels? That all the citizens of America are smuggling weapons down to the cartels. Oh, or they're stealing them? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Next question might be, what unit has been selling arms to the cartels? Actually, you should read a book by a friend of mine. Mike Deddy wrote a great book on Operation, Quarterback? Yeah. Go read, I forget the name of it, but it's about Operation Quarterback, but it's by Michael Deddy, D-E-T-T-Y. It's how ATF was selling weapons to the Mexicans for their cartels. Yeah. Remember what we was talking about when we say the government is not your friend? Government is not your friend. Big government is beyond that. Big government, and when you create a deep state, and this isn't the first deep state. Rome had a deep state. Spain had a deep state. The UK had a deep state, or has a deep state. And our deep state is the offspring of the British deep state. That's why CIA versus OSS. If you study the background and history of OSS in contrast to the history of CIA, you'll realize the reason that Bill Donovan, wild Bill Donovan, who was the founder of OSS under FDR during World War II, he was not picked to be the director for CIA. Why is that? If everybody says, "Oh well, CIA is just like, it was the continuation of OSS," no, it's not. It's not. That's part of the propaganda to make it look like, oh, it's already, there's a pretense to CIA. CIA is a totally different beast and a totally different animal. And when former CIA employees finally have that realization, it's kind of like people who've been working in the Peace Corps. I think there was actually a study on the Peace Corps about how the morale of someone who was in Peace Corps, and I forget what it was. It was like, it got to a point, it was like the first 6 months, they're all rah, rah, rah. And then after 6 months, they're just totally depressed until the last month or two before they're done. One of the reasons is because they go down to a country, they try to enact some type of, oh, we're here to save you. So we're going to help you create a beautiful well. I saw this in Honduras. Because I would hang out with Peace Corps. When I was freaking taking R&R, I'd go over to Tela. I'd go to Tornabay. You know, in on the coast of Honduras. And I'd hang out there. There's tons of Peace Corps over there back there in the 80s. And I'd hang out with them. I'd party with them. Just, relax. Just not a care in the world. Because it was safe, pretty much. And so I'd hear the stories from all these Peace Corps volunteers. And they would describe how, yeah, I got here, it was all exciting, and we were building this well. This was the design, this was the project. We were building a well for this village. And then I'd be talking to other people, they would be, and people were just leaving, and they'd built their well in another village. Said, yeah, it's just like we built a well, and they've got clean water. And then, like, within a year, they stop using the well. And they go back to getting the water out of the river, or whatever site that's just got horrible water, and they go back to their old customs after having built this beautiful well that should have been something that they should have kept there. So basically it's just wasted money, and it's wasted energy, and it's wasted ideals of these young kids who are coming out. If they're straight out of college, what am I going to do? Join Peace Corps. It's either that or the military, right? And so that's how it goes. And in the agency, it's like, you're like, oh, wow, we're fighting for the country. And then you're just like, well, what's this happening over here? And what's getting on that plane? And where's that plane going? And what is that crap that they're putting in there? And you're wondering what is really happening here. And this is actually, from my experience, during the war, we're fighting communism. And it was actually, I can only counter 2 wars in my mind, and I'll talk about that later, that I think were actually for the defense of the country. That every other war that I've researched, like I say, Central America and Korea are the 2 wars that were to truly fight communism and to keep it from taking over the world. But specifically in Central America, it was from taking the Americas. Because Fidel Castro would have succeeded. He would have succeeded if he already got Nicaragua. He was going to get Honduras, he was going to get Guatemala, and he was going to get El Salvador. And it was stopped. And that was the reason that Fidel Castro realized he could not win militarily in Latin America, and he changed his strategy, took all the money that he had, and he started investing in elections. Oh, and who did he learn that from? The power elites. Because they do it in our own country. That's how they do it. That's how they control. The power elites in our country buy the election. Whoever gets in is owned by these people. So if you're wondering why we've been spending so much money in Israel, so much money trying to go and start a war with Iran, we have done these wars in Syria, we've done these wars in Libya, it's because the Rothschilds, the City of London, and if you don't understand what the City of London is, you need to read. I'll put a link. That's what I'm doing nowadays. I don't want to have to put too much editing. I will when I start doing stuff on the Sean Ryan show, the Scott Mann show, the Sarah Adams show, and the Chase Hughes show. I will freaking take you down this road. I'm really pissed off now that Chase is doing stuff that you have probably no idea what he's doing. I do. And that's only because of my background and my training. And it pisses me off. When somebody is trying to hypnotize you on a show, trying to tell you to be aware of being hypnotized and psyoped, you should be pissed too. If you go to see a clinical hypnotherapist, which, by the way, I am actually a certified clinical hypnotherapist. I'm the guy that you come to, that you have to come to because you can't take drugs to be operated on. You cannot have surgery performed on you with drugs because you cannot risk the adverse effects of the drugs, or you just don't want to take drugs. You come to me, and I will take you through, and you won't feel a damn thing. Which, by the way, if you're in pain, it's a good skill to do, to be able to use. But I get really pissed off when and this is the psyop that's happening. They warn you about the things that you should be aware of, but they're doing those things on you. Damn! I was like watching this episode and I'm like, wow, he's doing it. And he's doing it with imagery. There's one, I will show it to you when we do the Chase Hughes episode, but it's the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. I'm going to call that whole segment the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. They all think they're saving America, and actually they're just a bunch of useful idiots. And I'm going to show you how useful they are and what a bunch of idiots they are. And you say, well, why these people? It's the audience that they have. It's the type of audience that they have. And it's the medium through which they are communicating through. Television, YouTube, monitors are very dangerous because I have to watch this. As I'm telling you these things, you got to be very aware of what's happening, which is you're not thinking as you're listening to me. You're just listening to me and you're being a sponge. That's great. But I am imploring you that everything, that's why I always, these other guys don't do that. I do this with you specifically. And what I do with you is do not trust everything I tell you. Shoot, one day I might just tell you a flat out lie, just to make sure to see if you're actually paying attention. That's why I always tell you, trust, but verify. Reagan came up with that one. It's a fantastic saying. Trust, but verify. You trust someone telling you things because it's your father, it's your mother, it's your sibling, it's me. I'm talking to you, and you're trusting the information that I'm offering to you. But you're going to go and verify later because I'm telling you. Don't trust me. Go Google it and DuckDuckGo it. You got to do both. Get in there with a Google just to see what it is. But then go into the DuckDuckGo and see what happens when you bring that up. Because Google is so compromised. They only give you information that they want you to know. And now that they've got ChatGPT, they're even more effective in being able to do that. And this goes back to what we're talking about. Choose your gurus wisely. What is a good teacher? What is a good guru? What is a good leader? A good leader will say, we're going to go on this mission, and we're going to go and hit this target. And I need every one of you guys to be squared away on all your duties, all your kit and everything, because this is what we're going to do. And we lay out the whole the whole mission is going to be laid out. We lay out the whole mission, and everybody in the team is asking the team leader, the platoon leader, what are we going to do? Where are we going? When are we going? When is it? Who, what, where, when, how? Why? Not too much on the why those days. Just who, what, where, when, how. Right? Which is kind of like journalism, which is sad because there's no why. There should be a why more. But they don't give you the why. I try to give you the why because when you understand fully the why, then you can extrapolate back in there and confirm it's inaccurate. And that's why you have this parlay, and you have this parlay back and forth within the team, and you're talking and say, okay, if we're going to go and hit this site, and this is the target, and this is who we're going to go get. What's the psychology of the person? What do they think? What do they do? What are their habits? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? We confirm this. Can you confirm that? Then you go back to Intel, and the guy says, oh, yeah, we say blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then if you're really lucky, you've got your own sources, and you can try and get information from them. So, yeah, that's pretty accurate about this and this and this. But the whole idea is that I'm always telling you, and I will tell you every time, hopefully, and if I get, sorry, but you can see them most of the times, I'm asked, check it, check it, check it, check it. One of the reasons for that is that it causes you to go and look at things, and it causes you to read. This is the problem of getting information through a screen. When you get information through a screen, there's no difference between you watching a movie and just absorbing the movie, where you're seeing everything and you're not firing off synapses in your brain to create things. Because when you create things in your brain, you're thinking. That's the reason reading is so important, and that's what has happened, sadly, to our society, is that everybody gets their information more and more for a computer. And if you're lucky, it's in text form, because it's a book that hasn't been translated into imagery. But a lot of times people just watch the movie and say, oh, when I watch the movie, blah, 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 instead of reading the book. Because if you read the book, you create these pictures in your mind. And that's why we've been dumbed down in the school system. The school system says, oh, no, just watch this video. You get everything in there. Instead of, well, shoot, when I watch a video and I see something about, well, let's see, August Belmont. Who was August Belmont? August Belmont was the guy that started the Civil War in the United States. Why did August Belmont start the war in the Civil War? The American, wasn't the Civil War, it was the War of Secession. The last Civil War we had in the United States was the American Revolution against the British. That was the Civil War. The, quote, American Civil War was the War of Secession, because it was the separation of, it was going to be two countries, and the South was seceding from the Union, from the North. That was a secession. That was a war of secession. That's the difference. A civil war is neighbor against neighbor. Secession are two nations, the beginning of two nations. So it was American. No, it didn't start off that way. It started off British fighting British. But they were still British at that time. There was no America until the Declaration of Independence. That's when we became a country, once we won the military aspect of it. Or basically, when the deeper you go down that rabbit hole, you realize, did we really win a war against the British, or did they just start thinking, oh, I think it's time for us to start doing a wealth transfer from the city of London to New York and bring the wealth from the English Empire to what would become the American Empire, all the way back in the late 1700s, early 1800s. And that, as I talked before, that our revolution, our civil war against the British, was actually a debt default because of how they were screwing with our currency. Had nothing to do with the Boston Tea Party. And isn't it interesting that all the history books are all about the Boston Tea Party, when that was just a blip? The real reason is because they wanted us to go on to their currency when we had our own colonial currency, and that's when we were so wealthy. And suddenly, we were under total servitude, under credit to the City of London, a.k.a. the Bank of England. Evil. This is the Rothschilds. But it actually started way before the Rothschilds. It goes all the way back to the incarnation of the City of London under Longshanks. Is it Longshanks? Yeah, Henry I. Anyway, choosing your gurus. When you are looking at someone who is an authority on YouTube and you want to understand things from this person, check out the person. What is the background of this person? And what is this person talking about? And why are they talking about these things? Are they talking about it because they're trying to cause you to believe something? Or they're trying to educate you and inform you and get you to ask questions that you can go off on your own to get a much deeper understanding of it? See, this is the thing about news back up until the 80s and 90s. Because by the 80s and 90s, Peter Jennings, Dan Rather, Walter Cronkite, a self-defined socialist, he started way back when? He started back in 1968 during the Tet Offensive when I was living in Saigon. And people thought that we had lost the war. We did not lose the war in 68. The war had actually been won to the point it could have been won by that point, and that the Tet Offensive was a last-ditch effort by the North Vietnamese in order to effect something as a last-ditch effort in South Vietnam. What happened was, and they weren't prepared for it, they didn't understand the effect it would have on the American people by all the news being broadcast, because Johnson was saying, oh, well, basically we've zipped up South Vietnam and everything's cool and groovy, and then suddenly there's a big giant explosion called the Tet Offensive, and then after that, there was the May Offensive, which, by the way, was bloodier than the initial Tet Offensive. We called it Little Tet, because according to my buddy Zaylen Grant, former military intelligence in the Army, and then he was a writer for Newsweek. And Zithia Press. Go check out his website, zithiapress.com, and read his books. I think the website's still up. And dang, that freaking motion sensor's up. I may have to stop this for a second, turn that sucker off. I'll be back in a sec. And we're back again. So you may have heard one of my sensors go off. So did I tell you? Maybe it's my background, but I know everything that happens on my property. I know where you are. I know how I'm going to respond to you, just based on blinks. So I have these motion detectors all across the property. I have cameras around the property. Guess what? If you have land, you should too. Whether it's a poacher or somebody who's up to something worse, like break into your house or maybe do some bad stuff to you and your family. So I would implore you, if you have property, it's not that expensive. Go get some. If you don't want to get security cameras, get some game cams. And I have both, and they're different. Like the Ring, we'll go into it in another one, but because that's a pretty in-depth thing, and I want to get through this because we're at 37 minutes. So choose the people that you follow on YouTube wisely, in the same way that you would have followed the information coming from a news broadcaster in the day. And this is the way we would look at the news before, which is you would take everything that came off of TV as a headline. And that's why this other person in this other country is doing so well. This person's basically being a news broadcaster, just calling out the titles, the headlines. Go read the article yourself. That's what we would do back in the day. You heard something about such and such. So then you go and get a newspaper. And then you read the newspaper. And then after you've read the newspaper and you really found something very interesting, like if I'm telling you about headlines about the Rothschilds or something that was involved in the Epstein files about cannibalism and a disease, well, if you're in medical and you like to study medicine, as I do, you'll go and read about this disease. I mean, I knew about this because when I was a kid, I read about it because there was still the backlash from Nelson Rockefeller's son being killed and eaten by cannibals in New Guinea. That's actually what started the Rockefellers, or pushed the Rockefellers to go further overseas and do all their programs around the world. Kind of like the Peace Corps was heavily tied with them, and that should make you question things like Peace Corps, Rockefellers, US Aid. What is it really all about? Is it about helping people, or is it about basically the same thing that the Chinese have learned, which is they copied it and they made the Belt and Roads Initiative, which is they go into other countries and say, oh, don't worry about it. We'll come in, build your road, put a bridge here. We'll help you build this new village and this new town. And then the bill comes and it's like, oh, we don't have the money to pay for this. How can we do it? Well, you have a gold area, you have a silver area, you have a petroleum area. You just don't tax us and let us come in, and hey, we'll be employing some of your people while we come and exploit it and get the resources out. So China is doing exactly what we did from basically 1946 until, we're still trying to do it in these different countries. We're going to see what's going to happen in Venezuela. I think Venezuela is just totally trashed. I think they're just I don't see anybody coming in there to go and get that oil. And by the way, trusting gurus, there's another guru that I'm going to be talking about. That's Chris Martenson. I've followed Chris Martenson since he was doing his shows in Northern California, because he would have these symposiums, and it was all about, we're running out of fuel, and it's going to be like this. We're going to have a cataclysm. It's going to be a total economic collapse because we're running out of fuel. Well, don't believe it. It's like that old saying that they used to always tell you, the reason we have petroleum is because these dinosaurs and these old trees, prehistoric trees, died and were buried, and then as they changed, and it became coal, and it became, the coal was the ancient prehistoric trees. But the petroleum, it was because of dinosaurs. Yeah, well, if that was the case, then we would have run out of it a long time ago. Then you start realizing that it's constantly, there's a constant income of petroleum, of oil. It's just harder to get to. But you'll see that as the world changes, in the thousands, there will be more petroleum, there will be more oil as it goes. But it's the marketing. You make it look like there's not that much of it, and the people go crazy for it. And then they pay more for it. And they will do whatever they can to get more of it and keep it coming. And that's how this power elite has become so powerful, is because they make it look like they have something that you absolutely need. But hey, look at my fans right now. They don't run on electricity. Well, they run on electricity, but it's not because they're plugged in. It's just because they convert heat into electricity. Wow, that's amazing. And then you start hearing, quote, conspiracy theories about Tesla, Nikola Tesla, and what happened to him. Did he die of natural causes? Why is it that, Trump. Trump's grandfather was the one sent in to go get all the plans and all the research that was done by Nikola Tesla when he died. Where did that go? Went into the files at FBI. You may have noticed that FBI is very good about keeping secrets. And that there's tons of files that the FBI has. If you are the owner of intelligence, of intel, and you have a depository that just reaches from building to building to building, how powerful can you be? Think about that. Pay attention to your people that you follow on YouTube. And that could be something as simple as someone that you're going to go and learn how to cut wood. I follow Bucket with Billy Ray. Why? Because that guy's been doing it for so dang long. You can tell with his background just by looking at him. He was a rocker. He wanted to play guitar. Band didn't go anywhere big. He might, now with all the fame that he's got. But he paid his house off. He raised his kids, making money as a tree faller, as a tree surgeon. Good money. If you live in the Northwest, you're doing that. Who am I going to go and listen to on how to cut a tree? How to do a Dutchman properly so you can get that log to just spin. Well, I got a bunch of trees that I'm going to have to cut this in the next month. We're going to be doing some work outside. You'll see how I have to cut these trees down. Because I've got a pollination bed that I got fenced off, and I'm realizing it's not getting enough sun. And I'm heartbroken because I have a beautiful line of lodgepole and Lutz spruce in a line that have grown. I've got pictures when we first got this property 10 years ago. And I'm looking at and it's like, they were little poles, and now they're this big. I can't believe how quickly. It's because of the work that I did on them. The way I limbed them. So that more sun would get onto the roots and they would grow faster than the other ones that aren't as limbed. And that's what I do through my forest. I go through the forest and I cut and limb. As I talked before, I haven't seen the moose. Every year I get a moose. Every 4 years I get a moose. Well, last year I didn't get a moose. Partly because I got 5 freezers that are full of food. They're full of scallops. They're full of crab. They're full of, we were raising pigs. I got so much pork in there. Traded pigs for beef. Got friends up the road. Traded for beef. So that's the way you live in the country. This is how we can be independent from all these freaking power elites. We don't need them. But they try to intimidate you. And one of the ways they do it is by trying to get you into the cities. Because when they get you in the cities, then you do need them. And you need them on your side. Why? Because all they got to do is turn off the water. Turn off the heating. Turn off all the freaking gas stations in town. And you're stuck. Out here, that's why I've been pushing people. When this starts to really hit. And that's what these people are thinking. I'm going to show you an interview that floored me. Because it's on a show that I was enjoying. And then I'm like, listening. And this person said, how are we going to control these people? And I'm like, he's telling you in your face what they're trying to do. How are we going to control these people when they're not getting food? When they're not making the money that they were making before? That's how these people are thinking. They are thinking ahead of you. And if you're still in the city, I know it's comfortable. You were raised in the city. You can't think of anything else. You can't think of being outside. It's intimidating. I was born in the city. I was raised in the metropolitans of Asia. I went through high school in San Francisco. What more beautiful metropolitan area. But then I made the push, which is I filled up a VW with all my books that I would need in order to read, to write my first memoir, the one about when I was in prison in Vietnam, The Bamboo Chest. If you haven't read that, go over to Amazon, get a copy. I'll put a link down below. Hey, and don't forget, I'm always bad about this. Like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. That's one of the issues that if people aren't asked, they don't even know to do it. You help me, and you help my algorithm, but I promise you I will never get above 100,000. Do you know why? We'll be talking about that. You get above 150,000, it's either bought or it's endorsed. And if it's endorsed, remember what I said about beware the gurus that you follow? You should be very clear on who they are, why they're there, and what's to that point. Something flips. That's when they start getting, oh, well, now we should start putting money into this person. Once they start putting money into you, you don't have your own voice. And you should be looking at your politicians. I'm always looking at the politicians to see, where's the money coming from? Who are the investors? Who are the ones who are putting it in? What are the names of those families? You should be doing that too. What has happened in Europe? Same thing. Everything that's happened in Europe is what's coming to the United States. The Europeans lost interest in their election system. They didn't think critically about who they were voting for. And then when people suddenly who came into power, and they're like, wait, how did that person come into power? Did that person actually get the election, or was it handed to them? And then once those people came in, and they got in totally, and they were able to initiate actions, then suddenly you had this invasion coming in. And remember, these people, culpability, they told us in that document that I gave you a link in prior episodes, replacement migration. It's a whole sheet. Go find the link, or better yet, Google it. Replacement migration, United Nations report, UN report. It will come right up. Read that damn thing. They told you what they were going to do. They were going to invade your country by bringing people from Africa, by bringing people from South America, by bringing people from Haiti into the United States, into Canada, into Europe, into Scandinavia, into the UK, and look at those places right now. Think about it. We are at war. There are various forms of war. You need to open your mind about what that really means. And you have to question, why is this happening? Who's telling you about these things? And how are they telling you about these things? When I tell you things, I want you to think. I want you to remain calm. I want you to think clearly. When you're all ramped up and you're getting all like whoopee-doobie and you're freaking like listen to Sean Ryan and Sarah Adams and Scott Mann, and they're like, oh my God, the terrorists are coming. Woo! I get pissed. The reason I get pissed is because I know what they're doing. And do they understand who they're doing it for? They're not doing it for you. You have no ability to deal with a terrorist other than what you should be doing every day, which is 24/7. I do it. EDC. I carry every day. Within 2 steps is the furthest away, if I'm not actually physically having one on my body, I have at least a handgun. When I make a long drive, I'm stacked. I hate to say it, but except for the Law rockets and the M79 or the M203, well, sometimes we have the M203 in the back. But whenever we used to travel in civilian vehicles, we had a stack. We had a bunch of Law rockets. We had Laws. We had a bunch of grenades. Oh, in the vehicle, unlike Tim Kennedy says, I've carried grenades. And last time I remember, I could carry about 10. 10? Yeah, that's like the biggest I've ever carried. 10. But I also had, everybody carries a belt for the gunner, right? Or the gunners. So you're carrying that. Plus you're carrying your food. All this kind of stuff. Yeah. But in a vehicle, you can stack that sucker up. You don't want to stack it so much that the back tire is kind of like, the wheel well kind of like sinks down too much. And you're like, oh man, that's a little bit too much weight on the back. But that's how we would travel between towns if we were traveling in civilian. Because if we did get stopped, you had an envelope that just opened up on that roadway that was going to cut everything down. When you travel nowadays, you should be thinking about that. If you live in a town, in a state, which, by the way, this should be every state, according to the Constitution, you should be able to carry a semi-automatic. You should be able to carry a fully automatic AK-47, fully automatic M16, and M16. Because under the Constitution, you're supposed to be an able-bodied citizen who was supposed to help defend the country against all aggressors. And as the cartels start ramping up, and they will, because there are a lot of cartels who live in the United States, mainly the wealthy, and the kids of the wealthy elites of the cartels, they send their kids to the U.S. to go to school because they have the money, right? Oh yeah. Beware of how you're being approached about information. Hopefully, when I am talking to you, I'm getting you to think, to remain calm, and make clear-headed decisions. Not laced by fear, not laced by intimidation, or laced by anger. I'll give you a hint. There's a point in battle where you use anger. It's a directed. That's the cone of energy that you use when you're actually in the fight itself. But up until that very moment, you are very clear-headed, trying the best that you can to not be swayed by fears, angers, all these things that can be played against you by the enemy. And when you see shows that are designed to incite you to anger and to rage, you should be questioning those things. Why is it happening? Why is that the actual psyop? The other type of show is the one that's just there to be a distractant. Is it there for you to just sit on the couch and just watch and watch and watch when you could have actually turned on the light, grabbed a book, and read about something 2 ways? If you wanted to live the adventure, you could go read about books. I have books on what it was like for people who lived here in the 50s and the 40s. Or The Wolfman. I'm reading about the Wolfman, Frank Glasser. He was a trapper, hunter up here in Alaska, and I think he even became a warden for the state of Alaska. And it's about his experiences and adventures. written by Jim Reardon. Jim Reardon just lived down the road over there in Homer. Yeah, until he passed away. I think it was like 2 years after I got back. Something like that. Or maybe it was even in 2017. But he used to walk the beach of Homer. And a friend of mine actually turned me on to him because he's a local author. And I started reading all his books. A treasure trove about what life was like in Alaska. You learn things. It's causing you, when you read books. Don't automatically turn on to the monitor. If you're missing time with me because you're reading, I'm happy. I'm joyful. Because that means you are going to think clearly. You're looking deeper into a subject. You look deeper. False prophets don't want you to look deeper. What they want you to do is take the information that they give you, and then it stops there. Whether they incite you to rage, to fear, they don't want you to go deeper into it, because if you go deeper into it, you've crossed the line into thinking clearly, to thinking critically. Remember, that's what this all was about when I first started this channel. It was Cork's Critical Thinking Corner, getting you to think clearly about all the things that are happening in the world, because then you might be prepared for what is happening and for what is coming. And remember what I said, you don't want to be culpable. And the only way you cannot be culpable to their evil designs is you are well informed. And the way you get well informed is you go and read the things. You read the links that I put in the pinned comment down below. I will put comments for you to go and check out the topics that I'll be talking about in the future. The shows that I'm going to be clearing up for you to understand how and what they're doing, and whether you might want to follow them anymore, or you might think, I could get the same information from a better source. Or when they do have somebody on there who is a published author, why don't you go and read their book and get past the sensationalism that was used in order to affect your emotional response? Remember what they've been doing to us. They've been getting us to respond emotionally to events so that we're more easily led down a road that we might not want to go down. Whew. On that note, we've been coming up on an hour. I want to thank you for having listened to me. Please like and subscribe if you do enjoy what I talk about and I open your mind and I get you to think about things. Check out the pinned comment with all the links that I have for you to go and delve further into the topics that I've been talking about, which I hope you do. Read up on stuff, and I'll have links for you to read up on further on behavioral modification and emotional response conditioning. There's tons of stuff on that. That's what they're doing. That's how they're using it. What they've learned to do in our prior media, normal news, TVs, we'll talk about things. You know this book that I'm working on right now? I actually proposed it under another title than the one it's going to release on to Random House. The biggest house, Random House. It went to the editor through an agent. You know what the rejection letter said? I read it and I was like, wow. You've said everything in this letter of why you should buy this book, except for one thing that I did not fit, which is it wasn't about it. My experiences did not happen in the Middle East. They happen in Latin America, which is interesting. I'm curious at what's going to happen as the Zionists move from Israel after doing all the crap that they've done in the Middle East. We'll talk about that. And they're going to Patagonia, as described in Theodore Herzl's book. That is kind of like the game plan, which is where it was the question, do we go to Palestine first or do we go to Patagonia? Because Patagonia, if you really just wanted to have a society of Zionists and Jews together and living a beautiful life, you'd go to Patagonia. But why would you go to Israel? Because these people genetically are not the children of Abraham, who is the one that is defined in the Bible as the people who go to Israel, the Israelites. These people are Khazars. That's why they have originally Polish, Ukrainian, Belarusian, Prussian names. Epstein, bet you his family comes from frickin' Prussia. That's a German name, but from Prussia. That is the whole area of Khazaria that was taken over by King Rurik. Who was King Rurik? King Rurik was the founder of Russia. King Rurik was a Varangian. The Varangian knights that protected the Pope. Interesting histories, huh? Reading helps you. But not only reading. This is the most important thing. And this is the thing that I have found. This is why I bring up my experiences in combat. Why I bring up my experiences in hunting and fishing and traveling the world as a photojournalist. And remember, I was a photojournalist when I started off. I didn't become a journalist, a writing journalist, until later. I was a photographer, a photojournalist, and a reporter. So I would report back, but then there's a journalist, a foreign correspondent working at the Wire office, at the Bureau, who would write the article, and then they would buy my photographs and put them in there. I always worked as a freelancer. Why did I work as a freelancer? Because then you couldn't tell me what to do. Actually, the places that I was going into, they would have told me you can't go there. That's the thing. Think about that. So you're getting the news from the actual staff photographer and the staff reporter, but their office is too afraid to send you in there because of the insurance question. But hey, there's the freelancer. Cork can go in. He can get his ass shot off. Yeah. And you can't lie and say, oh, report the news because you were down in the bar talking to the guy who is the information officer from the embassy. No, you actually have to be there and take the pictures so you can see the combat. Yeah, that's actually why I became a combat photographer, because I wanted to actually be there. I could not do my work unless I was actually at the scene. Unlike other people I've noticed in my past who have reported on things that they did not report accurately on. And that's the reason I talk about these things, because it's good to be well read. Being informed, accurately informed, is important as long as it also has experience. And this is when I will talk about something which is what I've seen has happened to our society, and why when you look at the writers and you look at the reporters and and the people who write films. See, because when I was a ghostwriter in Hollywood and I was fixing scripts because they were so freaking bad, because it came out of came out of their ear or came out of their side of their head, because their only experiences, they went to film school at USC and then suddenly they had a job. Unlike prior generations who may have been in World War I or World War II or Korea or Vietnam, or with me in Central America, like Oliver Stone's movie, total bullshit. Yeah, Salvador, total fucking bullshit. The guy who was depicted by, he's in my Facebook, his friend, he's, God, what's his name, the actor? But he played John Hoagland. I was friends with John Hoagland's wife, Laura Hurtado. She was trying to get CNN to open up an office, and I was going to be her cameraman. But John didn't get killed by a friggin' government plane coming in, and he's taking that picture in the movie like Oliver Stone did it. No, he got sniped. And the question is, was it guerrillas or soldiers? Probably soldiers. They shot him. And actually, that was when a lot of comic photographers started to question the viability of using a bulletproof vest, because it didn't work too well for John, because he got nailed. I forget whether it slipped in on the side where there is no protection, or in the vest that he was wearing, or it actually punctured right through the, I forget. I don't hold me to it. But he died. That's how he actually died. John Hoagland. Google him. Hoaglund. Yeah. comic photographer killed El Salvador. Before I got there, right? And she got killed, I think, when I was in prison in Vietnam. So, but it's experience, and it's the knowledge of this thing. That's the reason that, like, when I was telling you about my friendship with Ace Lyons, Admiral Ace Lyons, he had a top secret clearance, as high as you can go. He read the files on what happened at Pearl Harbor. So when he was angry about that, he knew. You should be angry too. That every war that we've been in since World War I has been contrived. And it was created. And it was all at the behest of the bankers. Think about that. Are you going to send your kids off to a war like that? The only war you should be fighting is on your own land. Home team, 9 times out of 10, will have the winning victory. We learned that in Vietnam. We learned that in Afghanistan. And you know what? We won in Central America because we understood that. That's the reason we didn't send troops en masse. Even during the Tet Offensive of 1989, Tet Offensive of San Salvador, a lot of troops were sent down there, but mainly there were special forces units with add-ons. Like a buddy of mine was 82nd Airborne, and he was a comm guy. He was the RTO, so that put him in, and he went to El Salvador, and he was in it. When I was fighting in the cities, he was out telling me about a battle that he was at on top of a ridgeline. I was like, oh, wow, interesting. And we met as returning adult students at San Francisco State. So there you go. Experience plus being well-read. Not just well-read. We have an issue with a lot of well-read people who have no idea what they're talking about because they don't have any life experience to go with being well-read. Choose your gurus wisely. Pick your advisors wisely. Pick your leaders wisely. Every one of them. Look at their backgrounds. Where do they come from? Who's backing them? Even if something as seemingly innocuous as a YouTube guy like Joe Rogan, like Sean Ryan, like Sarah Adams, like Scott Mann. Why are their numbers so high? Most importantly, so quickly. Oh my God. Have you ever questioned the idea of Ian Carroll? Have you ever questioned the idea of Whitney Webb? If Whitney's doing all this informing and accurate reporting, why is she still alive? People like that, normally, they don't have a long life expectancy. Think about it. Where is the psyop being played on you? That's why I say I will do my best to be honest to you and never go up above 100,000. That's my marker, because I look at the people who are just under 100,000, and that even means something as innocuous as a channel on Alaska. If they're above 100,000 and they're an Alaska channel, you know what's the first thing that comes out of my mind? Oh, are they Trustafarians? If you know what a Trustafarian is, then they aren't simple living in Alaska. And when you start following their background, you realize, oh, they go back to a very wealthy family in California. So when somebody's telling me that they have simple living in Alaska, and they've got all this machinery, and they've got, these Quonset huts, they cost a lot of money. You are not living simply in Alaska. When the truth comes out, and it becomes even more, and people cannot see. This is what they talk about when they're talking. When you listen to these spiritual leaders talk about this truth coming, that's what's happening. The veil will be falling. The Wizard of Oz will be clear. You'll see who's behind the veil, who's been really pushing the buttons, and you realize the facade when that falls away. And people have been following religiously whatever they've been following, instead of thinking critically. Again, I tell you, everything I tell you on this show, your coffee with Cork, or when I do my in-depth interviews with people, Google their names. Go through my deep dive interviews. I've created a playlist for all the people. Go through their backgrounds. Look at who they are. I'm amazed that people who are following me don't even know that I've been in prison in Vietnam when I was 18, that I wrote a best-selling book, that I've been on TV, that I was actually interviewed around the world, covered when I came back from Vietnam, that I understand real fame. That real fame is not because it's contrived and somebody is paying off these different agencies in order to get them to cover a certain person, just in the same way that Hollywood's been doing for years. Oh, you got to go. He's going to have dinner here. Go and interview him over there. Take some pictures of him there. It's been going on for decades. And it's transferred over into the YouTube environment because they realize that the YouTube environment is a sponge ready to be filled. And they're trying to make sure that the first one's going to fill your mind with whatever they're trying to fill you with. And I'm here trying to get you to think critically like your parents did and your grandparents did and your great-grandparents did, because of the education system that they went through, which is totally different than the one that you and I went through. And thank God my father told me the stories that he told me from his childhood, because that would make people glaze over if they were to hear the stories. Oh, he's going to tell me a story about what it was like to be raised in the Great Depression, or what it was like to be in school, or that he had critical thinking as a requirement in high school in order to graduate, because they knew that you might not go to college back then or university, but you needed to be a good citizen. And a good citizen was someone who looked critically at all the people they were going to be voting for, and to see whether these people were worth voting for, and if they weren't, to say, no, I'm not. But more importantly, if you start realizing that the ones that are being put up for you to vote on are all bought off, that it's time for you to start taking control of your government, that things have gotten way, way, way out of hand. Because they're spoon-feeding you who you're supposed to vote for. And that who you're voting for, you're not voting for. You're just accepting. And you're being compliant. And you're following like sheeple. I don't want you to be a sheep. I want you to be a human being. I want you to be a human being who thinks critically. Choose your gurus wisely. Choose your leaders wisely. Look at who they are. What do they know? And does what do they know jive what you can research and find out on your own? Does it take time? Yes. But what the evil elites have been doing to you and everybody, and me too, is they've been keeping you busy with other things so that you don't have the time to think about it. We'll talk about how they do that. Why being an employee is just another term for being a slave. Because you know what? Your parents and grandparents, especially your great-grandparents, they were not employees. They were business owners. Every freaking one of them. And that's what the Rockefellers and the Carnegies have done, is they've turned us from a free society where everyone had their own businesses, and they've turned us, most of us, into employees in these big corporations. These big corporations are slave houses. They're designed that way. They're designed so that you're reliant on it. There's no difference between a corporate house, a company, and some old coal mining village where you went in the coal mines and you were digging up coal, but you could go and buy your food at the company store. I mean, wasn't there a song about the company store? Yeah. So you're an indentured slave constantly. You thought we got freedoms when we came to this country, and we did, until the Bank of England, they got their claws back into us again, and we've been dealing with it ever since the early 1800s, late 1800s, late 1700s. Wild, since all the way back then. And it was a wealth transfer. What you should be wondering about, and we'll talk about that in a future episode, is where is this wealth going to go next? Because as they're destroying our currency, and have destroyed our currency, and we get these little blips, and people have this little, no, the price of gold is, it hit 5,000. Well, it's over 5,000. 10,000 by the end of the year. That's my bet going on with Vern. You know Vern? Vern from Bering Sea Gold, good buddy of mine. If you haven't seen our interview, go check that one. That's in my deep dive. He came over to the house. We're sitting in front of the stove, and we're just talking about gold and his background in the Army. Vern's a cool dude. Shoot. He says he wants to do a show on an interview with me on his show. I'll go over to his place over there in Homer. And we'll talk about gold. Gold is a barometer. It's a temperature gauge. It tells you where you are. Let me tell you, we're not in a good place right now because the price of gold is so high, which tells you the value of the dollar is so far down. Because we lost our reserve currency status. And that's based on trust. Trust and confidence. And when you don't have it, and Russia's not going to get it, and China's not going to get it. Because nobody trusts the Chinese, and nobody trusts the Russians. They'll do business with them. Shoot, I'm more than happy to do business with them. I'd rather trade freaking goods than trade bullets, wouldn't you? Think about that. On that note, I wish you a wonderful day. It's a beautiful day here in Alaska. It's all sunny. I'm going to go out, get as much wood as I can stacked up around the house, because tomorrow we're getting into the negatives. It's like 35 degrees right now. But within one day, it's going to go down about -2. Yeah! God bless. Watch your six.